Hi guys, welcome to the Classicist Corner. I'm Kat, and this week I'm going to talk about the 2005 Margaret Atwood novel, The Penelopiad. When I was doing my undergraduate dissertation on Odysseus, I wanted to include a lot of different perspectives in my work. So I wanted to look at, lots of different ranges of media, so films, comic book books, but also within that I wanted to get a lot of different authorial perspectives on the character. And that's one of the reasons why I chose Margaret Atwood's book, The Penelopiad, because she has a very distinct feminist voice within her work. So I thought, especially when discussing a very masculine and very patriarchal subject, which is ancient Greek heroes and ancient Greek poetry, I really wanted to get her perspective, especially in the sort of Canongate myth series that she was writing in at the time. So that was part of the reason why The Penelopiad was such an interesting book to me. And another reason is that it's from Penelope's perspective. It's a first-person narrative sort of told in hindsight from the character of Penelope from the underworld. And I felt that was a really interesting way to look at Odysseus and the Odyssey as a text. Now, Penelope is a very interesting character within the Odyssey because she is the quintessential perfect, faithful wife. She is a perfect ancient Greek woman. She listens to her husband, she is loyal to him when he's at war, and she continues to be loyal to him even when he is presumed dead. She shuns all of the suitors that come for her hand and therefore the throne of Ithaca. She respects her son even when she wants to keep him safe. She is dutiful, she is silent in public spaces, she is dutiful to her father-in-law, and ultimately she's a very faithful, perfect ancient Greek woman as presented in the Odyssey. That reputation of her as the faithful woman also continues into other texts such as the ancient tragedies. What's interesting is that she is sometimes compared to the other wives that are involved in the Trojan War. For example, her cousins Helen and Clytemnestra. Now Helen, while not particularly portrayed as a bad character or a particularly awful woman in the Iliad, actually she's quite respectfully represented for the time. She, in later texts, is sort of seen as this wily, to be frank, she gets slut-shamed quite a lot, Helen does, and obviously Clytemnestra is the murderous wife, so you have the unfaithful wife to Menelaus, the murderous wife, and this then compared to Penelope, the faithful wife. So she's often used as a stick to beat other women with. So she is the perfect wife in a patriarchal society. So when it comes to the Penelopiad, which, by the way, the name of the Penelopiad is a epicification of Penelope's name. The Iliad is the story of Troy or Ilium, and the Penelopiad is the epic of Penelope. So when it comes to her perspective from the underworld, you sort of see the inner workings of this so-called perfect wife, and throwing in obviously Margaret Atwood's own feminist agenda in there, and I say that not as a negative thing, as quite an interesting literary tactic. She sort of portrays Penelope as a woman, as a real and genuine person, rather than this image of this perfect wife. Through Penelope herself. Penelope becomes a very real character in this book. She is difficult in her own way. She has her own difficulties, and it's through her a very different image of Odysseus comes through, rather than the hero he portrays himself to be in the Iliad, or the villain that he sometimes is in other novels. He is a person as she is a person. Now, when it comes to the relationship that Odysseus and Penelope have as husband and wife, it comes across as, again, very genuine. Penelope, from the underworld, is aware of the time in which she was married and aware of the constraint she was as a very young girl. She was 14 in the novel when she's married to Odysseus, and she sees his flaws. She sees that he is cunning with his words, and initially Odysseus actually wins her over in the novel. Their relationship is quite good when they are initially married, but then of course she has his son, and then he almost immediately goes off to war. And again, she is faithful to him, not through any particular grand gesture of faithfulness, just because she is. The reputation that she gains as the faithful wife is as much an image as Odysseus's image as the cunning man. It's really interesting how that works within that. And she has a very difficult relationship with her son. Penelope in the Penelopiad respects him as an ancient Greek man in public, but she actually thinks he's a bit of an idiot. And she thinks he's a bit too big for his boots, and I find that really funny. But Penelope isn't a perfect woman. She's actually quite harsh to other women, and she has this sort of standard of herself as the faithful wife, but she judges, and as much as she sort of doesn't like that image of herself, she still judges other women. She's very harsh to the image of Helen. She's very harsh to Helen in the underworld. She still judges other women quite harshly, and I think that's quite an interesting point in Margaret Atwood's books about women, particularly in The Handmaid's Tale as well, where Margaret Atwood sort of portrays the harm women can do to other women. And Penelope, having grown up, having been exposed to the very patriarchal culture of the ancient Greek world, is still just as harsh to women as much as she wishes that she wasn't reacted to as harshly herself. And that's something I find quite interesting. Another part of Penelopiad which I really love, especially because, again, I studied narratology, so the study of narrative in my master's, is that, and if I would come back to actually studying this book properly, I would love to do a full analysis of it, is the narrative aspect of Penelope's world. She is telling the narratee her story. So it's her perspective. It's not Odysseus's, it's not some third person, it's Penelope. And through her, we can see some cracks in the narrative aspects of poems like the Odyssey. Particularly Odysseus' own narration within the Odyssey of his adventures while he's getting home. Because there's rumours coming back to Ithaca while Penelope is waiting for Odysseus. She is waiting and she hears rumours that, oh, he's on this witch's island. Oh no, but actually the witch's island was a brothel. Or that he is caught in a storm, or no, he's just doing something else. The fantastical elements of the Odyssey is called into direct question by this book, by Penelope herself. She doesn't know how much Odysseus can tell the truth, and she doesn't actually fall for his cunningness as much as she does in the Odyssey. So as much as Odysseus thinks she falls for things, Penelope claims that she actually never did. But by also a standard that she calls into question the narrative of the Odyssey, that leads the narratee or the reader to call into question her own narrative. We don't know whether her perspective is the so-called real perspective. It is definitely her perspective. It's a female perspective. It's her perspective of this novel, of the poem, of her life. But by calling into question the other parts of the Odysseus story, kind of makes us question her own reliability. And that's fantastic. It's a really good, strong, clever novel. And Penelope becomes more of a person. So yeah, it's just a really strong book, and I would definitely recommend it, especially if you guys are liking the Handmaid's Tale at the moment on Hulu online. And if you go read that book, read the Penelopiad as well, especially if you like the Odyssey. It'll definitely give you a really good couple of things to think about. So next week I'm going to be talking about something else, and I will see you then. If you liked this video, please like, share and subscribe. Bye guys!